subject this morning, with love possessed. Of course, this refers to divine love. Ordinary human love is limited, but divine love is unconditioned. I have an opportunity to meet many devotees. And when, through the grace of God, His love flows through the hearts of those devotees, the communion is indescribable. Our Master has said, God loves us so wonderfully and silently, and through the hearts of His devotees. So do not think that you can only feel the presence of God when you merge with Him. Of course, that is the prime source. But He is in the hearts of each one of us, because He has naturally placed within our hearts His unconditional love. The natural love of the heart is a very important matter as we work our way back home to God. Now, why is this? Why is love so important? It is not human love, as I have said. It's a far greater thing than that. It is the great force of attraction in the universe that is drawing all things back to God. God created this universe through love, and He has left some of that love in the hearts of each one of us. The planets are drawn together. The atoms are held together. All things are held together by love, the great force of attraction. If it were just a force, that would not be sufficient. But in that great force of love is God's great intelligence and love. That's why it is so important to understand the importance of love. And if we can be possessed by that great love of the infinite, then we have all things. Now, why is love so important? Well, from 1 John, 4th chapter, the 16th verse. God is love. God is love, and He that dwelleth in love dwelleth in God, and God in him. It could not be any clearer. And when you can feel, through your meditation and through the grace of God and through your spiritual discipline, His love within you and in the hearts of others, then you will realize the importance of this statement, God is love. The two greatest commandments are what? First, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy strength and heart and mind. And the second, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself, because when you love God to that extent, you will feel Him in the hearts of all. And so on these two commandments hang all the law and the prophet. On these two commandments. The commandments of love. God is love. He who dwelleth in love dwelleth in God, and God in him. So let us remember these things. We must attain, we must realize that love of the one eternal Father. Having that, all things will be solved. Without that, nothing will be solved, and we will be miserable. Such is the power of love. This is so because each one of us is a child of God, and born of Spirit in all its purity, in all its glory, in all its joy. We are made in the image of God. I say that ye are temples of the Holy Spirit, and God is in you. In Corinthians we read words to that effect. We are made in the image of God. And if God is love, His love must be in us. But we have to remove those inhibitions which prevent the free flow of God's love, giving us peace and bliss and joy. But when you just can taste a little of that through His grace, then you will realize how important it is compared to other things which might be non-existent. Such is the power of God's love. Cultivate it. You have the ways and the means through the practice of self-realization, fellowship, yoga. Yoga means union. Union with what? Union with God's love. Your love united with God's love. That's the goal of life, That's why we're here, to consummate that. The power of love is tremendous. And though we forget our birthright, God's love, and we live in delusion, and because of that we feel separated from God, still we have within us the power to remember His love and be one with it, because we are His children and because His mercy endureth forever. You will always be able, because He loves His children so much, to remember the love of the infinite Father. But until you do that, through His grace, you will feel separated from Him. And that's the whole delusion. If we can but remove that idea of separation from God, things will be different. If you feel the presence of the one Father within you, nothing else matters. Such is the power of God's love. That is our birthright, being made within like He is. His natural, or His love is naturally implanted in our hearts. Our Master's Guru Preceptor Sri Yukteswarji has this to say about the natural love of the heart. He says, cultivation of the heart's natural love is paramount in following the spiritual path. And unless one does cultivate that, he can hardly take a step toward heaven. So important is the cultivation of the natural love implanted in your heart. That is, uniting it with the one great reservoir of love, which is God's love. It is very important. People may study, they may know all the different scriptures, and they may know all the techniques, but unless that natural love of the heart is cultivated, they can't take a step toward God. Why? Because God is love. God is love. He who dwelleth in love dwelleth in God, and God in him. It is a very simple thing, is it not? But delusion also is very darkening, and we put it off. We put off our greatest engagement, which should be and is with God. He gives us everything. All He wants us to do is not to forget the giver in preference to His gifts. And we do it. We do it repeatedly until finally, through His grace, He touches us enough so that we realize that's what we want and that's what we need. And so we are destined, if we will, by meditation, by spiritual discipline, especially by the grace of God, to once more remember the love which is within us as the Father's presence. Practicing that presence, we will be above all delusion. There's nothing like the love of the infinite Father to remove the desires from the heart. Nothing else will do it fully. But when you feel His love and the desires of the heart are removed, then the spiritual eye opens, and you can see Him face to face and feel His love with you. That's the power of love. People will meditate, perform Kriya Yoga for years. They see the manifestations of the light of God, but until the heart is pure gold, by the washing and regeneration of the Father's infinite love, through the holy vibration, the spiritual eye will not open. But when it opens, He easily shows you His kingdom, and you feel His love. God is love. Let us not forget that. And so the goal of life, as I have said, is not just to be born and live as a human personality and then be thrown into oblivion. That's not the goal of life for children of God. It can't be. It is not. All the scriptures say so. All the great saints say so. We will not be cast into oblivion if we do one thing. If we search out the presence of God as love and merge in it. Because God has everything. He has universe upon universe. All things He has created, and He has except one thing. And that's that natural love in the heart which he has placed there. And he also gave us free will to unite that love with the one love of the Father or reject him. Having given us that free will, he can do nothing about it because he doesn't want to. He could easily dissolve the whole thing. But he wants the play to go on as he created it. And giving us that natural love in the heart, we have the power to accept God, unite it with him, and be in peace eternally, or reject him and be in misery eternally. Now, indifference is a very sad thing. Indifference we must guard against. Many people are indifferent to the presence of God within them. What happens? With indifference, God's grace will not come. Why is it that we are drawn to this path of self-realization, wherein if we follow its tenets and its techniques and its meditations, we will be able to unite our love with the presence of God? Why are we drawn here? Did you ever stop to think? Millions in the world cannot even think of self-realization fellowship or what it stands for, the truth of existence. We are drawn here because of the grace of God. Now, if you are indifferent to the presence of God, you may miss that opportunity to respond to the grace of God, and you will have to stay in misery a lot longer. And so indifference is a very important thing. Do not be indifferent to God. Indifference means perhaps you put it off. Oh, I'll search out God tomorrow or the next day. Now we must find him. Right now. Let not a moment go by. Let not a minute pass away. For the first thing we will realize is life has passed and we have not found God. And that's why we're here, to find him. Indifference must not be indulged in. We must not be indifferent to that which is our very existence, the grace of God. We are drawn to this path, which gives so many of us, and will give all who will follow it, the peace of God's presence, because we were not indifferent to the pull of God's love. Now, just from one of Master's books, I'd like to read what he says about these things of which I have just spoken. A disciple who felt that he had failed in a difficult spiritual test was reviling himself, and the Master said, we must not revile ourselves. If we are children of God, we are children of God, that's all. So he says, do not think of yourself as a sinner. To do so is a desecration of the divine image within you. Why identify yourself with your weaknesses? What of it if you have been weak? Right now you can be strong and turn toward God, and the weaknesses are a thing of the past. Some of the greatest saints, as you read their lives were nothing to brag about. What of it if we have done these things and done those things? God's play goes on and we're thrust into it. We may be drawn into it and have to play certain parts. We have to do it because that's the law of life. But we also have free will to get out of it. And that's what we should do. No matter what we have done, forget it. As Sri Testaji said one time, or wrote, he said, the moment you turn toward God, forget the past. The moment you turn toward God, things will be better for you spiritually. They cannot help but be. And so Master says that very thing. Why identify yourself with your weaknesses? Instead, affirm the truth, I am a child of God, and mean it, and feel it. You couldn't say it, you couldn't mean it, you couldn't feel it, except it were true. I am a child of God. Pray to him. Naughty or good, I am thy own. Reawaken my memory of thee, O Heavenly Father. And so those are the words of our Master, which reiterate what I have said in a stronger way, that we have the power, we have the ability, because we are made in the image of God, to rise above these weaknesses and consider ourselves not weak, but as his child. Now another thing that is very important is this. Don't waste time. Don't waste time. Every day time slips away. Doing what? Well, talking about one another, wasting time, many things. I don't need to go into them. But if you are not careful, the life will pass away and you will not get out of this delusion. You will not be able to enjoy oneness with the Father. Every minute must be utilized. Every moment. That's why regular meditation, such as self-realization is due, is so important. Because it takes our free will to get out of it. God wants to get us out of this delusion, but He's given us free will and He can't do it. He cannot do it, because that's His law. And so it's up to us not to waste a minute, as our Master has often pointed out. Every day, keep your most important engagement, and what is it? With God. Just meditate even a little time, even 1 hour out of the 24. If you'll do that, salvation will be yours without question of a doubt. Keep your most important engagement with God. Don't say, well, tomorrow I'll start. Or next week when things are better, it's not so hot, then I'll start. No, forget the heat. I noticed in meditation there, I felt a lot better when I was meditating. When I came out of it, then I felt the heat again. But what of it? God is with us. What do we care about a little heat? And so it is very important not to say tomorrow or the next week I'll start. Right now I must have the Lord now, because our Master has said, and the Scriptures say, do not waste these precious minutes. Every opportunity that you have, do your meditation. And the techniques of self-realization are so ordered that you can utilize the golden moments, and you have plenty of them, in which you sit around and do nothing. So let us realize these important things. Do everything to please God is the easiest way. That's the way to beat the game, so to speak. Everything you do, no matter what it is. Yes, meditation, do it to please God. It's difficult. Making beds, do it to please God. Anything. Cooking, which some people dislike. Father, this is my part I have to play to take care of my husband and family. I do it to please Thee. That's the way to beat it. And so, as the Gita says, he who never forgets me, I never forget that devotee. Realize that. He who never forgets God, God can't forget that devotee. Well, now you've got to love God to be able to do that. To do whatever you do to please Him. So it is important, very important, to know God's love. And you can know His presence, His love, through the channel of self-realization, because our Master knew His oneness with God, and He was the greatest example of the love of the infinite Father that we have found so far in our time. Realize these important things. Now, in one of Master's letters, he wrote a very significant thing, which I would like just to read to you at this time. He said, in one of his letters he wrote from Cuba a long time ago, I think it was 1929. He wrote from Cuba there, and he said, last of all, in his letter part of it, he said, last of all, now is the time or never. If you don't start, you'll never finish, will you? Now is the time. Make up your mind. You're going to do it from now on. Now is the time or never. Meditate deeply at night. Throw yourself at the feet of God. Steady coaxing is necessary. Sincere heart call to make Him speak. Don't wait. Pray unceasingly for illumination and God's love, because it'll come no other way except through the grace of God. You can prepare yourself by the techniques of self-realization, fellowship, and prayer, and working to please God, but the final thing must come through the grace of God. And so he says just that. Pray unceasingly for God's love. God's love will move him. If you feel love for the infinite Father, that'll move him when everything else fails. Then he says, lose not a minute. Don't be fed up with waiting hopes of this and that. You know how disappointing life is. You have great faith in someone, especially on the spiritual path, and it fizzles out. And so Master says, don't be fed up by waiting hopes of this and that. Eat God now. Nourish yourself on eternity. What wonderful words. Such words are there because he is a saint. Nourish yourself on eternity. That is, get into the eternal consciousness of the presence of God instead of staying in this mundane consciousness in which there is no fulfillment. Fulfillment is in God. And so Master says that. Waste not a minute. Mix with those people who feel the presence of God as I'm sure they do in Self-Realization Fellowship. And when you mix with them, commune with the presence of God in them and in yourself as his children. Master said this wonderful thing. He said, Divine Mother sent me all these souls that I might drink the nectar of her love from the chalices of many hearts. We're apt to neglect people. We're apt to neglect people, but who is in those people? It is God's presence that's in them. His love is in them. But if you haven't got it in your heart, you can't feel it in those people. If you've got dross in your heart, meanness, discrimination, resentment, how can you feel the pure love of God? Clean it out. Clean yourself out by meditation and deep prayer to God. Then you can feel his love in others. And not only you feel his love in others, but you do others good. Because if God flows through you, if through the glance of his grace his love flows through you, it flows to all. And those who can receive it, receive it. Those who have dross in the heart, even though you want to give it to them, a million times they cannot receive it. Such is the law of love. And so as Master came to drink God's love from the chalices of so many hearts, we too can be instruments of God if it is his will, through his grace. And we can be sure of it if we cultivate the natural love in the heart. And so in closing, let us remember that God made us through love. He must have thought an awful lot of us. When we forget that, we go around our business, forgetting that God is crying for us, as Master has said, more than we want him. He's crying for us. If he made us through love, it must be so. And he is drawing us back to him through love. And that's why love is the greatest force in the universe. Because it's the attractive pull of God's presence within us. His great force of creation has made all things, but all things will resolve back into him. Therefore, his great force of love and attraction is greater even than the force of creation. Now, if God has made us and is drawing us all back to him, shouldn't we give him our love, that we be with him throughout eternity? We're foolish. All the saints say, God alone, God is love. Why not give him our love and be with him eternally? We are very short-sighted unless we realize this one eternal truth. But those with the keenest minds, without feeling love, cannot know the love of God. And yet the simple and humble people who feel God's love can surely attain his presence and his love. So love is the key. Love is the key to all spiritual attainment. You may go so far by techniques, Kriya Yoga, and the many things which discipline the body. But finally, the final step comes through the grace of God. And if you love him enough, his grace will surely come, and he will take you into his ocean of love to be eternally with him. So, as one great saint said, these are important points. Don't think you've got to have a keen and sharp intellect to find God. If you have a sharp intellect, you have to feed that intellect, because you've attained that intellect. But if you haven't, don't worry. I think you're better off. Because this great saint said, of God no man can think. Realize it. No man can think, because God is above thought. He's above reason. You cannot reason God. But then he goes on to say, through affection and love, he is easily attainable. And not only attainable, but kept. Because God is not thought or idea. He is love. God is love. And if you have affection and love in your heart, you can easily attain God, and not only attain him, but he'll respond to you every time. You can keep him. Many things in this world of existence slip away. But if you get God's love and really feel his presence, whenever you feel it, that love in your heart, it'll come silently over you, like a thief in the night. Of God no man can think. That's a good thing, isn't it? At least it spurs us on to get above these thoughts which are so embarrassing and troublesome. And by affection and love, you can feel easily the presence of God. And so by the knowing power or the mind, just think of it. God is ever incomprehensible. Let's throw the mind away. God is ever incomprehensible. But, as he said, to the loving power or the heart, he is evermore comprehensible, as the soul can receive him. These are wonderful truths. By the mind, he is ever incomprehensible. But by the power of love, he is ever comprehensible, as the soul can receive it. And finally, so important is love. So important is love. Remember this last one sentence. It is one sentence. Feeling God's love is the fullness of life without end. Not feeling his love is death without end.